Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again. Actually, joining us again. I'm joy to have a guest with us for this conversation. For those of you just tuning in, my name is Dwayne Edwards. I'm the founder of VMHA. VMHA stands for Veteran Mental Health Assessment, and we have a team of experienced psychologists that conduct comprehensive mental health assessments for veterans with the purpose of helping them move forward on their mental health journeys, right? And so in my previous videos, I've done really informational content about the work that we do and about veteran mental health claims. This video is going to be a little bit different, really because of the fact that there's a lot of good facts and a lot of good narratives and exposure about how veterans' mental health has been impacted. We know that by suicide rates being disproportionately higher for our veteran community. We know that about divorce rates being disproportionately higher for our veteran community. And there's a lot of strong narratives about those conversations. What we found, though, is that there hasn't been enough exposure. There hasn't been enough narratives about the veterans who, yes, they've been impacted, and they are doing things to proactively manage their mental health to move forward in their mental health journeys. And so we set out about several months ago to start just talking with our community and start having more conversations about this really crucial topic. And so we're pretty excited to actually kick off the series with someone that I had the pleasure of meeting just maybe 2 months ago at MCon in Las Vegas. And so, ironically, and Robert is a extremely well-dressed gentleman, and he's actually the reason I put on a jacket today. I was expecting him to have a jacket on. He's not wearing a jacket, so now I feel a bit overdressed. Because whenever I've seen Robert, he's had a jacket and usually a pocket square of some sort on. And so, here we are now. I'm very prepared for this session. But I put all those jokes aside. I've had the pleasure of having a bunch of really great conversations with Robert, and I've also taken a look at his LinkedIn and his background, and he spent over 25 years in the Army as an officer. Retired around in the early 90s, if you will. And then since then, he's gone on to have titles like CEO, COO. He's founded numerous organizations. He's done quite well with his entire career and extremely well with his post-military career. And so Robert is an extremely impressive individual, in terms of his background, but also more importantly, just a really great human being. So thrilled to have you here. And I'm even more excited to have you share your story with our community.
Yeah, Dwayne, first of all, are you sure that's me you're talking about? and secondly, the reason I don't have a jacket on today is one of the things I want to talk about, of course, is this emotional PTSD thing, but how I'm dealing with it. And I've got my very fancy jacket on here, which talks about, well, it's actually a vest, our Rally for Vets program. Excellent. So I'm going to get that at the end. So this is just a shameless plug for another organization, that is focused on helping vets. So other than that, I would have had the jacket, and you were quite right. It would have had some pocket square in it.
Fair enough. Well, listen, there's no shame in success and plugging and marketing, and so you're dropping a nugget already. So I love that, Robert. Well, why don't you, could you tell us a bit more about your background, who you are, what you've done. I know I've given a little bit of color, up front, but I'd love for you to kind of focus on the things that are most important to you in terms of your background and what you're doing now. Please tell us more, Robert.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Springfield, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. My father and uncles, I mean, I'm on the older side of vets here. I mean, believe it or not, I am the very last of the great generation because, I was born in 1944.
Wow.
So that, yeah, I mean, we're into the eighth decade now, and that's a little bit surprising. But anyway, so grew up in Springfield, Virginia. Family was in the military, but that was World War II related. I did my undergraduate work at the Virginia Military Institute down in the Shenandoah Valley. For some reason, I always wanted to serve in the military. It just kind of captured, my imagination, and I blame it all on Alfred Lloyd Tennyson, who wrote The Charge of the Light Brigade, that I read somewhere. And believe it or not, I spent almost all of my field duty in cavalry units, either armored cavalry or air cavalry. But anyway, so that's the background. I went and came on active duty back in 1967.
Wow.
And retired in 1992. And so, most of our younger, veterans, much younger than that. But, I'll get to it. But it's those younger vets that I'm interested in. So right now, as you said, I retired from the military. I worked in the aerospace industry for a while. In 1998, I came out to Los Angeles and went through business school at UCLA. Graduated in 2000 from the Anderson School. Formed a little software company with one of my classmates. We sold that. Then I've done some, some consulting, and I got into the nonprofit world about, almost 20 years ago. Because in addition to what we're going to talk about later, I wound up being diagnosed with prostate cancer at 58. And so that diagnosis led to an interest in helping guys understand and deal with their prostate cancer risk. So here's a plug, okay, for, guys, when you hit 40, you should take that annual PSA test and personally track the number. Don't rely on your doctor to do it. Just get that number, and then the next year check that number, and then draw a line between the two. And if it's going up, now it's a good time to talk to your doctor and say, hey, what's going on? And one of the things that our charity has done, we have a free little tool on the internet called Prostate Tracker that's free and anonymous. Guys can go in, create an account, put in those numbers, and when they have the second one, the tool will actually just graph and show a trend line. So if there's an increase, I talk about that tool making prostate cancer visible. And this is the last note. Prostate cancer generally doesn't show any serious symptoms until it's progressed to stage 3 or 4. And when it hits that point, then there really isn't any effective cure. Okay, so that is a downer about prostate cancer. So guys started at 40 start testing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that, Robert, because I know we're focused heavily on mental health, but the reality is that so much of your physical health actually impacts your mental health, right? And so there's so much of all these things that are actually could be cancer, could be issues with working out, except whatever it is, but they all have relations with your mental health. So I appreciate you plugging that in, so our listeners can actually think about that and maybe make the connection.
No, Dwayne, you're absolutely right. And my personal experience, and we'll come to that, is physical activity, just exercise, those things, they've been the key to me in controlling and supporting my health, both physical and mental. But let me give you a little background on what I was doing way back in the early dawn of time.
Please tell.
So my basic branch was armor, but in 1967, early days of, Vietnam, or the early days of our active unit deployment, everybody coming, into the Army, we went into, first thing was, Ranger School, after basic. And then, of course, everybody wanted to go to jump school. So I went down to Fort Benning, went to jump school, and then got assigned to the 173rd Airborne Brigade, operating, up in 2 Corps. So that was, my first tour. And I was a platoon leader during that one. After that tour was over, being an armor officer, I rotated back to Germany and commanded a troop with the 14th Armored Cavalry Regiment up in Fulda, Germany, what we call the Fulda Gap. I don't know if anybody knows about that now, but in those days, it was kind of like, Afghanistan. People were rotating back, after a year. So my command was due to, finish. We, command lasted 1 year, and I didn't want to go back on the ground. So I took the flight aptitude test and sent that off to my branch and said, hey, do I qualify? And their response was a set of orders sending me to flight school. So
yes, that was a yes.
And so, the fact I think I read that during the Vietnam conflict, the Army trained 40,000 helicopter pilots, both
Wow.
commissioned and warrant officers. So during Vietnam, the Army had more pilots in the Air Force, and because of the riverine patrol boats, more ships in the Navy. So anyway, so that was that. After that, I came back to the U.S., went to Command and General Staff College. I worked in the Pentagon and current intelligence and Secretary of Defense's office. And during, I also spent a tour of duty at UCOM headquarters in Stuttgart. And, for 3 years, I traveled almost everywhere in sub-Saharan Africa.
Wow.
So, career-wise, and I finished up, my last part of my career was at State Department. I was the military advisor to the Africa Bureau and State. So, a great career, an interesting career. Lots of interesting stress in those first 3 years.
Sure.
That I carried along for years. And I think I mentioned this when we spoke when we were at UCOM. I mean at MCOM.
Yeah.
So that was the background. And, I think I'm probably just like every other soldier, sailor, Air Force, person that, when you're on active duty, whatever stresses you're showing, you're not supposed to show, because that's just the way it is. And, you have these experiences and it goes into your memory and it's with you, but you're not supposed to really show or talk about it. And I think by and large, it rarely shows up in somebody's military service record. That's
right. No, you're spot on. You're spot on that. So 2 things I want to highlight. First off, I have a deep appreciation for my Vietnam veterans. And so I want to take a moment to make sure that thank you for everything that you and your generation did for us when we came back from Iraq, Robert. As you know, we came back and there were parades and there were people with flags and posters, and that generation, your generation, when you came back, it was a very, very challenging time. We had a very confused country at the time. And so really appreciate you and your sacrifices for that, deep down my heart. Absolutely.
Well, it's my, I think I can speak for, for most of us that, said, we were just, doing our duty, what we were called upon to do. And, I hope that, by this point in time, most of us, that are, have looked back, and realized that, that it was an unusual, time in, our country's history. And it wasn't that the Americans didn't like us. It was they didn't like what the government was doing, and we just happened to be, the way to express it. So, I mean, that's the way I look at it. And,
Yeah.
it's just my way of, I guess, coping, if you will.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to frame it. It's something I've my local VFW chapter here. One of the ways I've heard them frame it is, hey, you can hate the war, but you never hate the warrior, right? And you have to be able to separate that, right? And so that's what I kind of hear you saying, Robert. So I think that's a great way to frame it. I want to move into something you shared about. You talked about, the culture, the adapt, overcome, the suck it up, like I'll figure it out, that kind of thing. And what leaves many of us as we're in service or after leaving service to not realize that, oh, we've built a few band-aids, right? We've built a few ways to mask our issues, or we've normalized how we've changed in a way that makes us feel like these anger outbursts, or it's just me, this is how I operate, or my relationship challenges, this is just me, this is who I am now. I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit about whether you experienced anything like that. I know you have a family and you've had relationships there. So how is that? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So this is really interesting. I mean, yeah. I mean, my experience is I turned into this a couple of things. Sadly, in both of those tours, I lost, men that were under my command, and you always have a sense of guilt about that because you're doing what you're supposed to do, but your job as a leader is to make sure that everyone comes back. And when you fail in that, it's just there, and then it becomes part of your psyche, if you will. I mean, it's just guilt you carry on forever. And even today, I mean, I know I'm not alone. Anybody that's in combat and has lost a fellow soldier, you have to wonder, well, why fate chose him and not me? And
survivor's guilt. Yes, indeed.
Yep. And then I think the other thing you carry with you is a responsibility to try and make up for that, in some way. And but anyway, so for me, it wound up two things really affected me is and that is the reluctance to create close relationships. And friendships. And so it's, well, I mean, it sounds so trite, when you say it, well, why build a friendship if you're going to lose it, and have that. And it just, now it sounds so strange to say it, but I think, I carried that feeling inside, and so that was one issue. And I mean, that impacted me, somewhat in the military, but, a lot after I got out, and started, into my business career. Okay. Because I mean, you succeed by relationships. Okay. And, and if you're not making relationships, it's making things very, very difficult. And that's whether you're trying to build a business or, whether, you're just working at a company. So it was this relationship thing. And then, kind of this short fuse, temper, just getting angry at inconsequential things. something that really didn't matter. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's an outburst. So where did that come from? It's like what you said. Is that just who you are? Well, I don't think I was like that when I was a kid. And so one of the things, you asked was, well, how did you discover this?
Yeah.
And so I'm at my disability rating is 90% for, a couple of reasons. But I got clued into this really at one of my annual checkups at the VA. And they, ask some of these questions, and it's, are you sleeping okay? And, and how are you, interacting with people? And they referred me on to a psychologist. I think I told you the story at when we were at MCon. And when I had that initial meeting, and then my homework was to go away and write down descriptions of all these incidents, these combat related incidents that I'd had over those 2 years. And it literally took me weeks to do this. Going back and reconstructing this, looking at, maps of our operational areas for those 2 tours in Vietnam and writing it all down, and then I came back and for me, the result of this was really significant, because almost all of that, anger dissipated, and when it shows up, I now understand where it's coming from. So my takeaway from my experiences to guys is, even if you don't believe that you are carrying these emotions, it cannot hurt, okay, to sit down and have a conversation with someone who's trained in, perceiving, these emotions and knowing the cues and knowing how people can mask it or hide it. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm a history major and a business guy. So, so excuse me. So you're going to have to put the right spin on this. It's just the way I think about this, since, I had my experience. And in a way, it goes back to, this prostate cancer thing. Because it's the same as taking a test when you don't think you have it. Right? And then all of a sudden you find out that there's that indicator and there's the beginning, of it. And for prostate cancer, if you find it early, it's treatable. And I almost say, when you're dealing with PTSD or emotional issues, the earlier you can find it, okay, the easier. Well, I don't know if it's going to be easier it's going to be to treat, but the more of your life you're going to be able to live without, dealing with those emotions.
Yeah. No, that's Robert. You dropped some really great nuggets there. I mean, first off, there's strong data that shows journaling is so important, so crucial for your mental health, and even being able to allow you to navigate through and lessen the symptoms and triggers that you're experiencing. It's almost like you're externalizing, the trauma for the first time, right? And so that's absolutely true. And I'll tell you a personal story, because you've shared so much with me and the folks here. When you share about the anger outbursts, that's a piece that resonates with me deeply. When I left the Marine Corps in 2013, and then it wasn't until 6 years later, after probably a few times, that my wife said, "Hey, maybe you should go talk to somebody." That I had a sharp reaction to something. I thought, well, why was my reaction so sharp? That doesn't make any sense. That like, I don't understand why I didn't have the control to be able to maneuver through that. And so I started seeing a psychologist for about 6 months, and that was life-changing for me. So that, I really appreciate you sharing that with our folks, because, it's not us, right? And you once you're able to recognize, like, no, this this isn't me. Let me get some help from someone that's actually trained, qualified, to be able to ask me the right questions and perceive, as you said so well, perceive what you can't see, right? Because maybe there's a world outside of your own two eyes that could actually help you see the world a bit more broadly and effectively. So love that you shared that. So thank you for that. Let me see. Look at my notes here. Now you covered some really, really great ground. You shared how you learned about your challenges and whatnot. When you can, so you've a rating of 90% right now, right? Some of that I'm assuming is mental health specifically related. Right. And I'd love for the people listening to maybe learn a bit about, sure, you have this rating for mental health, and that's great because that means you're also getting, compensation for that. But tell us about, beyond the compensation, Robert, what are you doing to proactively manage your mental health, to be able to help you to be, to help you to socially function, right? And to help you to move forward in your journey in spite of your challenges.
So, I think, Dwayne, obviously people are different. But for me, I found that exercise, physical activity is my stress reliever. And the way I get around this is, well, one of my principal things is cycling. So in 1992, my sister got me into bicycling. Okay. And then I got into, let's do competitive cycling.
That's only right.
on the amateur basis. Okay. So I got into that. I got into road racing. I did, some mountain biking. Here in California, we have, in LA, we have the US's only world-class indoor velodrome, for track cycling. So I got into that, and I in my age group, I was a state champion back in 2015.
Congratulations.
And now find out that the World Cycling Championships are going to be in Montreal, Canada in 2026. Okay. So what else have I got to do? I'm now going to start training for that. And so, of course, there is amateur cycling is big in the United States. There are so many clubs. The United States, Cycling Association is there, just local clubs. And so, since 1992, I've ridden about 26,000 miles.
Wow.
So I try and hit about 1,500 miles a year.
Okay.
And as part of our, helping other vets, there's a company or a platform called Strava. And it's just an internet platform. It's got people, who ride bicycles around the world, go on there and, they log their rides and ride in groups, blah, blah, blah. So I've created the Rally for Vet Cycling group on Strava.com for anybody that's using that. And so we just started that. Now we've got about 60 vets from around the country who, when they ride during the week or during the weekend, their rides are just automatically posted to the group. Once a week I go in and give them an attaboy, for the guy or gal that's ridden the longest single ride, the most mileage for the week, or climbed the most vertical feet in a week. So far, I have never had to congratulate myself at the top step on any of those podiums. But I do that, and got into pickleball. Okay. My wife and I do yoga. We walk. So for me, it's anything physical. Can get over to the gym, and I try and do something literally 4 times a week. So for me, that helps me control. My Sunday morning is a long ride, is 30 miles, and I call it my stress buster ride. So you can do it alone. This stuff you can do it, in groups. I would just suggest everybody, whatever you do, get off the chair, get off the sofa, just go do something outside. Okay. And it's going to help. And of course, the other thing I like to do is, always like to race cars. So we have the Rally for Vets Motorsports.
Of course. I just like to race cars. Of course.
So the Rally for Vets Motorsports program. And so this year at Summit Point Raceway, just outside of Washington, D.C., is our 5th annual event. And, we'll have 100 guys coming together and competing on service teams to see who's going to be the 2025 Top Dog champion. So that's how I deal with this. And the good thing is my wife doesn't cycle with me, but she does yoga with me, and I've got her into pickleball.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Oh man, Robert, that's great. I mean, you dropped some great nuggets there. What I'm hearing you say, I'm hearing community, in as an overlying theme in terms of, what has been important to you, community, physical activity, having deliberate things for stress relief for you, being proactive about that. Back to the community piece, having ways to collaborate, interact with like-minded folks. There's some strong data that shows for us veterans, not losing that community or staying involved in our community is so helpful for us holistically and specifically our mental health. The physical activity piece is so crucial. So thanks for stressing that, because when the reality is, we're used to the regiment when we're in service, and then many of us leave, and then the couch starts looking really attractive, right? And it's hard to get off that thing. We got to get off, and maybe we can't do, how many miles did you do this last year?
Last year has been bad. It was 800. My target is 12 to 15.
Okay.
And so I've been working too much. So my 2025 goal, is to get back to that number.
Fair enough.
That I always feel better. And the other thing is, you only need one other guy or gal. Right. Okay. It doesn't have to be a big group, but if you can find one other person, that you team up with, okay, because they're the ones who are going to help you get off the couch. They're, you're going to wind up being each other's support group. So if it's not a big group, one battle buddy will do it.
That's right. And I joke about the miles, but I love what you said, and you shared, whatever your needs are your needs, right? Each of us are different, and maybe it's not cycling. Maybe it's CrossFit, maybe it's mindfulness, maybe it's running, whatever it is. Maybe it's, going to therapy because you realize that is actually crucial for you. And maybe it's, different types of therapy, but just got to figure out what's the best fit for you and go do it. Get off the couch. Yeah. Robert, this has been such a remarkable conversation. I appreciate you for your honesty, your willingness to share your story. That is a story that, I know that our community, will appreciate hearing, and I'm thrilled to just be a conduit for being able to amplify that story. Before we close out, I'd love to give you an opportunity to share any parting thoughts you want to share with our community that's kind of listening and watching you right now.
Yeah. Well, Dwayne, thanks for having me on. I mean, it's a pleasure. It was great meeting you at MCon. That was, a little meeting, I think, was one of the best things that came out of that trip over to Vegas.
Appreciate that.
So my final points I'd say to guys is, number one, don't try to tough it out. Number two, there are resources available. Use the resources. Don't be afraid to connect. Number three, understanding the feelings, and emotions that are there are going to lift a huge burden from your shoulders. It's just going to be palpable, but you have to take the step. My fourth point would be there's great life on the other side, okay, of this. You've just got to get through it, acknowledge it, find that help, do it. And finally, hey, take that first step.
Man, I could not have asked for a better person to kick off this series, Robert. You have done a remarkable job. In fact, I might actually ask you to come back and lead this thing for us because you did such a great job with this. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you on behalf of the entire team at VMHA. Thank you. And for anyone that's watching and listening here, this is all about helping you and us as a community move forward on our mental health journeys. And we're all starting from different places, right? And our military service has impacted us each differently. And maybe it's combat related, maybe it's not combat. But if you are impacted and you are different, then as Robert said, take that step. There are resources out there to help you. VMHA is one. There are many others. And we are thrilled to support our holistic community in moving our mental health journeys forward. And if you are someone like Robert who has been impacted and you're taking proactive steps to move forward on your journey or have taken steps, we'd love to hear from you and would love to give you an opportunity to share your story so that we can have more of these stories being shared about us doing things as a community to move forward on our journeys. Thank you all for watching. And Robert, thank you very much for sharing.
Dwayne, it was a pleasure.
Pleasure's mine.